Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Right, Rapido have just released their brand new J52 tank engine and I'm really looking forward to getting my first proper look at this thing. But of course it's only a couple of months since Hornby released their brand new J52 tank engine. So in today's video I'm going to review Rapido's and then I'm going to compare the two to find out which one is best. Right, so today's engine then is of course this, Rapido's brand new J52, or in this case J13. Now this model was announced just over 2 years ago in November 2023 and here we are in December 25. This thing's just come out. I guess technically it came out at the end of November, so about 2 years. Nevertheless, here it is. Really looking forward to seeing this. So Hornby versus Rapido then. Hornby's is the most expensive of the two models. It has an RRP of £174.99 and you can pick the Hornby one up from the retailers for £157.49. Rapido's is cheaper though. The RRP is £164.95, so that's £10 cheaper. Or at the retailers, you can pick this up for £140.20, which is £17 cheaper than Hornby's. So Rapido's is the cheaper of the two models. So if everything else is equal, then I'm going to say Rapido did the best J52. But Hornby's J52, Hornby's J13 was absolutely amazing. You can see it behind me here. The detail, incredible. The quality, outstanding. This thing's almost entirely made of metal. Brilliant mechanism, very serviceable, brilliant performance as well. Rapido have got to do a lot if they're going to do better than Hornby's. Maybe Rapido is more of a budget version. That's a possibility, so maybe this is going to be a little bit below Hornby's. If it's only a little bit below, then that's okay because it is cheaper, but it's only about 10% cheaper, so it's not miles cheaper or anything. So this ought to be very, very interesting. Really curious to see what this is like and to finally get my hands on one properly. So if you'd like to pick up one of these for yourselves, I do have affiliate links down in the description. I bought mine from Derails Models, so I want to give them a little shout out. Thanks for the great service, and I also got a packet of custard creams with this as well, which I consumed greedily within about 30 seconds of opening the box. But anyway, I'm going to try not to get too distracted by the custard creams. Let's open up Rapido's brand new J52. Alright, so I am very well prepared for this. Brand new pair of slippers, new one. Thought I'd treat myself on Black Friday. No real reason to mention that, but I've done it now, so there you go. Anyway, quite a modest box, not too massive, but it's obviously what's inside the box that we're all interested in, so we'll get into that very quickly. Anyway, there are loads of different liveries available from Rapido, which is a bit different from Hornby's really, which at the moment is quite limited. I think there's only 3 different liveries to choose from Hornby. Rapido do have a lot more, so that's an important difference to mention. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box. The one I've gone for is the Great Northern J13. I thought that would be best for comparison. It's product code 958001, so that's the one you want to search up if you want one. It is in the Great Northern Green. It's number 1210, and this is DC silent with DCC fitted options available too. So with that, I don't think there's much else to see on the box, so let's open this up and let's see what this is like. There's quite a few things I want to focus on. A big thing with Rapido is serviceability. A lot of the times I've found that their locos are not as serviceable as they ought to be. Hornby's J13 is very serviceable, so that might be a deal breaker for some people. In fact, it might be a deal breaker for me. But anyway, here we have it, the J52-2. That is the original J13 then, not the J14. 060 saddle tank. Let's see what we've got. So, important info, yeah, that's all the same usual stuff. Bit of prototype history here. If you want to pause and read that, feel free to. Next page, unboxing, running in, that's fine. DC silent, DCC operation. Here's the important bit, how to fit a DCC decoder. So it looks like the body is screwed on. The instructions just mentioning removing 4 screws. And then it looks as though the entire upper body comes off, which is good. Hopefully that works very nice and easily. It's got a Next 18 DCC socket, which looks like it's easily accessible. You can also see the Stay Alive capacitors. That's another feature that this loco has, built into the model. That's really good to see. Obviously, that will only work on digital, as far as I know. Servicing your model, so it looks as though the only servicing you have to do is put a blob of oil on that gear, for which there's a little hole so that you can do that. Obviously, you need to do a bit more than that for servicing. What about lubricating the bearings or cleaning the pickups? I'll be interested to see how the bearings and pickup situation is with this loco, so we'll get to that. There's a list of the DCC functions if you've got a sound fitted version. Accessories, so here's a look at some of the accessories. We've got quite a few fancy bits and bobs actually. We've got coupling hooks with chains fitted to them. Looks like we've got some fireman tools as well, shovels and such, and we've got a bell. That's for the NRM Special Edition only. No mention of lamps though. Of course, Hornby's J13 and J52, that did come with a set of lamps. Not seeing any mention of that at the moment. Let's see if we can find, yeah, there's an exploded diagram. Very, very tiny, of course, but you can just about get the gist of this thing. It's pretty damn complicated, that's the gist. But yeah, looks fantastic. Can't wait to see this properly. And yeah, there we've got some photos of some of the real engines. Right, let's take a look then at the loco itself. There it is inside the box. I'll also be very curious to see how the colour differs, if at all. Apparently, Hornby and Rapido exchanged information on the colour data so that the two would match. So will they? I'll be curious to see. Right, accessories are in the top, so let's pull this out and let's look at them. All right, so we've got fireman's tools, as the instructions said, and proper screw-link couplings with chains on them. It looks as though we've got screw-link couplings and 3-link couplings, so you can fit whichever one you want. This is quite a bit different from the Hornby accessories bag. We did get lamps, so Rapido haven't provided lamps. Hornby's came with vacuum pipes for you to fit yourself. It looks as though Rapido have fitted those, and also Hornby's came with a front coupling. Again, maybe that is pre-fitted from Rapido. So Rapido don't have the lamps, but they do have the fireman's tools, and they do have the chains for the buffer beams. But it is fair to say that neither manufacturer have provided the full package. If Rapido had provided lamps, then that would have been the full package. Anyway, I don't really use those, but I like to point it out. Right, are you ready? First look at the livery. Ooh, that is it's quite a finish, that is. Yes, certainly is. I can see there's a big gap around the dome. That doesn't look as polished as Hornby's, that's for sure. But yeah, the finish on the tanks, almost said boiler there, looks very good. And noticeably the finish on the smoke box is more matte than that. So that's a nice feature. Yeah, looking pretty good, it must be said. Right, let's lift it up. Am I getting the weight? All right, you know, there is quite some weight here, you know. Of course, Hornby's model was extremely weighty. It really was a heavy loco. This, I can't really call. Is this heavier than Hornby's? I'm not entirely sure, you know. This could go either way. Anyway, it's looking pretty good. That plastic rod on the side looks dreadful, and it's not fitted properly. So hopefully that's not glued into the wrong position. Otherwise, that is going to be a big point against Rapido. But looking beyond that, the rest of the model does look pretty good. We don't have plastic handrails. That's good to see. These do look like they are wire, at least most of them do. And they're sturdy either way, so that's nice to see. In terms of construction, it does seem pretty similar to Hornby's. So we have got the die-cast running plate, and we have got the die-cast saddle tanks. Like Hornby's, the cab and the smoke box, I think, are made of plastic. So yeah, again, I can't really call which is heavier just by holding it. We will have to wait and see. But anyway, full comparison coming up. We will take a much closer look at this in just a second. But first of all, let's have a bit of background on the J13 or the J52 in real life. The Great Northern J13 started out in 1897 and it was designed by Henry Ivat. Used for shunting work, 85 were built in total over 12 years, and they featured large saddle tanks, 2 inside cylinders, and a loco weight of around 52 tons. The J13 was based on the older J14 design, which was a Sterling design, so I guess the design could arguably be traced back to Sterling. And while the two classes, the J13 and the J14, were very similar, you can tell the J13s apart because they were built with domes. Under the LNER, many of the J14s were rebuilt into the J13 design, and all of these 060 saddle tanks were reclassified by the LNER. Those that were J13s from the start were classified J52-2, that's what we see with this locomotive, and the J14s became J52/1s after their rebuilds. By the time war broke out in the 1930s, the engines were very old and they were earmarked for withdrawal, but thanks to the war they were actually kept in service. The final locomotive wouldn't actually be withdrawn until 1961, but then at that point every example, barring just one, would be scrapped. The single preserved example, which is number 8846, was purchased and preserved by someone called Captain Bill Smith, and this would actually be the first ever locomotive to be preserved from British Railways. Without this locomotive, the entire J13 and J52 class would now be entirely lost. Right, I am dying to know which of these two is heaviest. So we've got the Hornby loco and the Rapido loco. Remember, Rapido's is quite a bit cheaper than Hornby's, so I was not expecting this to be anything like as heavy as Hornby's, but the two feel quite similar. So anyway, let's refresh ourselves on Hornby's. That is, I make that 237 grams. Let's see where Rapido's sits. Here we go. Ooh, so close, 224 grams, so just over 10 grams lighter. So as expected, Rapido's is lighter, but it is much heavier, and there's a lot more metal on it than I was expecting, given some of Rapido's previous locos. So that, I think, is relatively impressive. Right, let's jump into the comparison then. So the first thing to say is, obviously, these two are prototypically a little bit different. There are some detail variations here, so do bear that in mind during the comparison. And because of that, this can't be an apples to apples comparison because the two are slightly different. Having said that then, let's jump in. I must say both of these models are absolutely beautiful. They are both fine models. I think they both look absolutely excellent. I do think though, as usual, it is the quality and the finesse that is letting Rapido down here. There is a noticeable difference in this area between the two models. So the big thing was this very obviously plastic rod on the side of Rapido's loco. It is not fitted correctly and not great. The rod on Hornby's loco was perfectly fitted. And honestly though, even if this was correctly fitted, it is still obviously a painted plastic part. There is flashing on it, the finish on it isn't particularly realistic. I think the Hornby one was much subtler. The same is sort of true of Rapido's other rods as well. I mean, these might be metal, that top one does seem very sturdy, but it's still got that sort of painted finish. The rods on Hornby's are clearly made of metal. They've got a much more realistic finish. I think when it comes to the smaller details, I do prefer Hornby's. Then of course there is the fit of Rapido's dome. This just doesn't look good. There's a big gap around it. That big gap is noticeably absent on Hornby's. And the thing is, I've said this so many times about Rapido's locos, and we're still seeing this issue. Now, it might not be that Rapido are just not listening to feedback, because they actually are pretty good at listening to feedback. I think it's because they are just rushing through so many projects. They've not given themselves time to act on feedback between models. So I think there is a case to be made for Rapido maybe slowing down a little bit and doing a better job, because I've lost count of how many models look a little bit dodgy when it comes to the fit of details to boilers and tanks and such. Yeah, Hornby's looking a lot better here. In terms of quality, I've got missing glazing on my Rapido. One of them's glazed, but on the left hand side here, that piece of glazing is missing. So quality control, quality issues, they're here once again. Again, this is chance, I'm sure they're not all like this, but on my Hornby example, all of the glazing was present and correct. The other big difference is the finesse of the handrails. So I'm going to show you the ones on the side of the cab to start with. Get that into your mind. This is the Rapido cab, and then here comes the Hornby one. the handrails look so much finer on the Hornby, to the point where if you step back, there's a big noticeable difference, isn't there? Same on the top of the tanks. This is the Hornby handrail holders. The handrails themselves are much the same, but as you can see, the Rapido handrail holders are much chunkier. And then of course you've got the silver painted handrails, which the Hornby example didn't have. All of the Hornby handrails were black. Which is more prototypical? I'm not sure. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on the prototype. But what I can say is if they're supposed to be silver like this painted sort of almost matte finish isn't great. If I show you a Bachmann chrome handrail, this is the sort of finish I'd expect from a quality model. Again, that painted look isn't the best in my opinion. Another thing I've noticed is the finish of the running plate. So on the Rapido, we do have this kind of orange peely texture to it. The Hornby one, I have to say, looks a lot smoother and a lot more realistic. There's more rivets on the Hornby one as well, but again, that might be a prototypical difference. If you know more about that, please do share that down in the comments. But yeah, bit of an orange peel texture on the Rapido running plate there. That is noticeable. Finally then, on quality and finesse, look at Rapido's chimney. You can see there is a big join here where the top of the chimney fits to the bottom. The Hornby chimney looks a lot better. There is no big gap there. It looks like a single piece. Now, the Rapido chimney is built like this so that their tooling can accommodate lots of different chimney variations. Maybe Hornby's model doesn't have that many variations. So Rapido have given themselves the power to create more different looking models. Hornby maybe have fewer options, but the options they can produce look better. So which is the best option? Which is the lesser of two emails? Goodness me, I don't like to judge which emails are better than others. Which is the lesser of two evils? You decide. Again, you've got a lot of comments to send today. Let me know what you think. Okay, let's talk about paintwork and decoration then, because the story there is quite different. Now, I say apparently Hornby and Rapido shared colour data so that the two locos would match. I can say, I think quite conclusively, that the two do not match. They are very different looking. Now, the colours may be the same, that is true, but the finishes are totally different. So as you can see, Rapido's, at least where the tanks are concerned, Rapido's has a much glossier finish to it. Hornby's is more subtle. It doesn't shine quite as much. It is more matted, I would say. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because when it came to the lions, it was Hornby's loco that looked way more colourful and sort of glossy, whatever. Rapido's was the subtler. This time, I think it is Hornby's that looks more subtle. Which do I prefer though? I think Rapido's. Generally, I think the Rapido paint job looks better to me, and I'll give you some examples. So here's the Hornby running plate. It looks to me as though the decoration on here, the lining, has been applied through a stencil or a mask, something like that. It's not actually particularly fine. And this is noticeable now that I have the Rapido model where the lining is far, far finer. Same on the steps and such. So I think the precision of the decoration is miles better on the Rapido model. There's also more detail in the Rapido paint job. I mean, look at the Rapido wheels. All of the spokes are lined. Maybe this is a prototypical difference. Again, if it is, please do let me know. But noticeably, there is less detail on the Hornby wheels as far as the paintwork goes. The Hornby wheels do have the lathe marks though. I might as well mention this now. The little dots in the center where the axles would be, Rapidos are missing those, which is interesting. I think Rapido's choice of brass coloured paint is also slightly better and brighter than Hornby's. So look at the splashes and also take note of the builder's plate there. And then here's the Hornby one. Yeah, the Hornby one is subtler, but I don't know. I don't know if that looks quite as clear as Rapido's. I would be inclined to say that Rapido's paint job here is definitely sharper. So if you like your liveries and you're interested in that, I think Rapido's looks better. There's a few other things going on as well. Differences really are, I'm not going to say whether this is better or worse on either model, but noticeably the Great Northern lettering is much larger on the Rapido loco than it is on the Hornby's. Now, is that just a prototypical difference, or is one of these better than the other? Do let me know. Same with the side of the cab, the running number, much larger on Rapido's than it is on Hornby's, which is smaller. Interesting to note though, isn't it, for sure? And as I noted earlier on, the Rapido model also has a matte effect on the smoke box, just like the Hornby one did, so not a great deal of difference there. Detail-wise then, there's quite a lot going on here. There's a lot of different details. Now, some of this is going to be prototypical. So here's the steps on the Hornby model. We've got a totally different style of step here on the Rapido model. If we look at the Rapido coupling rods, these look a lot better, I think. These are painted, they've got lining, maybe slightly finer as well. On the Hornby model, these were left plain. So I don't know, maybe that's a prototypical difference, but for the cheaper model, Rapido's certainly seems to be a lot more complex when it comes to the detailing. Here's a look at the smoke box door. These are quite similar. Again, there are differences in terms of the riveting and such, but there is the Rapido smoke box door. Notice the handrail here is sort of chrome painted or silver painted. Here's the Hornby one, very, very similar, like I say, but again, notice the handrail here is left black. Interesting difference to note. They have different buffer styles. As you can see, we've got a more cylindrical buffer housing on the Rapido model with plain black buffers fitted. On the Hornby one, we've got more sort of conical housings, but the buffers themselves are chrome coloured. Both models have sprung buffers though, and there's the Rapido buffers springing. Here's the buffer beam out of the box. So yeah, we do have the vacuum pipe pre-fitted on the Rapido example, but we don't have any coupling hook pre-fitted on the Rapido example. With Hornby's, they did fit the hook, but I don't believe there were any other options. With the Rapido, you've got a plethora of options. You can fit a hook without a coupling on it, they were included, or you can fit a hook with a screw-link coupling on it, or you can fit a hook with a 3-link coupling on it, so more customization. As I've already mentioned though, we don't have any lamps with the Rapido J52, although with the Hornby we did have lamps, so that is a difference. Let's take a look under the boiler of both locos then. So here's Rapido's. We've got the lining on the underside of the boiler, just like with Hornby's, and then we've also got a representation of the valve gear here. Now this looks quite detailed compared with Hornby's, which seems, I would say, less complex. But with the Hornby one, the valve gear sits a little bit deeper in the chassis. The Rapido one is a bit higher up. So I think the Hornby one is subtler, but the Rapido one has a bit more detail to it, and I guess because it's higher up, you can notice it a little bit better. The Rapido version has this pipework in front of the cab, and again, the finish, particularly on the brass parts, is really, really good. I do like the choice of paint here. It's looking very good. Can't compare that with the Hornby one because this example didn't have that. That is a real life difference though, so it's not a criticism of Hornby or anything. Here's a look at Rapido's safety valve and whistle area. So interestingly, the top of the safety valve is painted silver here, and then we've got the moulded plastic whistle which has the brass colour on it. The top of the safety valve on the Hornby has more of a copper colour to it, and again the whistle looks very, very similar. No big difference there. Again, which one do you prefer? Let me know. In terms of the cab interior then, it's a little bit tricky to call this. In fact, I would say there's not a great deal of difference. So here's the Rapido cab. Notice the definition on the lower pipework here. This seems to stand out pretty well. Notice the regulator, the ends of the regulator are painted. We've got paintwork on the gauges, that looks really good. And I believe this loco does have firebox flicker. I think I'm right in saying that. I might eat my words on that if it doesn't when I come to test it. But yeah, I think it does. And then the back wall of the cab has quite a lot of detail to it as well. With the Hornby, things are pretty similar. We've still got the painted gauges, but looking at the pipework, it doesn't seem to stand out quite as much. I guess it's more obvious that this pipework is just moulded onto the backplate and then painted. I think the Rapido looked a little bit better. Also, when it comes to things like the regulator, there's less detail picked out on this. We don't have the ends of it painted silver, for example. So yeah, some subtle differences, but both cabs are very good. Here's the back wall of Hornby's. Again, we've got that turning wheel. Yeah, it's very, very similar. A very interesting difference is the rear windows. So with Rapidos, we have individually fitted bars for the grille over the windows there. With the Hornby one, I don't think these are individually fitted. I think they're moulded into the glazing piece and then painted. It is kind of hard to tell. And when I first looked at this, I did think those were separately fitted. But no, those are, I think, part of the glazing. So the question is, which looks better? Obviously, Rapido's is more complex, but I don't know if it looks a little bit messier. I don't know, is Hornby's finer looking? Again, I'm sorry to ask for so many comments this time. Which of the two do you think looks better? Coal load wise, I think Rapido's coal load looks better, hands down. Yeah, there's quite a lot of definition in that coal load. Looking at Hornby's, it's fine, but yeah, there's not quite the detail there, and yeah, the finish I don't think is quite as good either. Anyway, there's a lot of differences here. I mean, we've got the cab roofs. These are obviously significantly different, but that's not really a sort of better or worse difference. That's more of a prototypical difference. So there's lots to weigh up here. There is an awful lot. And it is hard to say which is better, bearing in mind Rapido's is quite a bit cheaper. In terms of the retail price, Rapido's costs £17 less. And it is a more complex model, the paintwork is better. I don't know, maybe the value for money is slightly better on Rapido's, but it is lacking in quality and finesse, isn't it? The Hornby model is more expensive, but it is heavier, that's fair to say. It is higher quality, at least going off these two examples, no doubt about it. Hornby's is higher quality. It is a little bit more finessed, I think, in its level of detail, but maybe the attention to detail isn't quite as good. I think particularly where the paintwork is concerned, the Rapido model does look better. But yeah, there is a lot to pick apart here. Personally, I think I prefer Hornby's. I would rather pay £17 more for that little bit of extra quality. But I don't know, if you prefer your paintwork and you don't mind the lack of finesse with Rapido's, maybe that's a no-brainer for you that Rapido would be best at £17 less. I'm not too sure, but of course the review isn't over yet. We haven't seen the serviceability of the Rapido Loco, and we haven't seen how it runs. Maybe this will produce a clearer winner. So there she is down onto the track, Rapido's very, very beautiful J13. And I have already run this for the first time. I've run it in, I've filmed the tests. I won't spoil those for you for now. I'll show you those in a second, but they are done. After that, I took this apart to look at the mechanism, and I'm going to walk you through that now. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I had my doubts about this. I'm going to be brutally honest now and say we have seen some badly designed locomotives from Rapido this year. Locomotives that look beautiful but are not very practical. Form over function, they're not serviceable, they're not easy to get into, they're very, very frustrating. And I feared that this would be the same. I thought this is the area where Hornby are going to stride ahead, because Hornby make beautifully serviceable locos and Rapido, based on their track record, don't. Well, I have to say I was entirely wrong. This loco is totally different from all of the other Rapido locos I've looked at so far. The mechanism is spot on, I cannot fault it, and it's really easy to service. In fact, it's more serviceable than the Hornby J13. It is easier to open this up and access everything than it is with Hornby's model. I can't believe they did it. Now, how can that be? Is it the extra competition between Rapido and Hornby that has caused this? I don't know. I don't know how it could have been. Did Rapido know what they were up against? We know Hornby and Rapido shared some notes with each other, but I'd be surprised if, notes on the mechanisms and such were shared. So is it just that Rapido pulled out all of the stops to make this as good as it possibly could be in an attempt to try and thwart Hornby? Have they just taken feedback on board at the right time and they just happened to produce a loco that was slightly better than Hornby's mechanically? I don't know. I mean, Hornby's has only been out for a couple of months, so they certainly didn't buy one of Hornby's and look at that and see how they could improve on it. They can't have done that. But I don't know. Either way, though, just in the nick of time, they have made the right changes, a lot of the changes that I've been calling for. And this loco mechanically is really, really good. So let me walk you through some of this. So the outer driving wheels, the ones at the front and the back, they're quite tight. There's very little side play on those. But the centre wheels have a lot of play on them. So this should be pretty good on tight curves. That should mean that this is not going to struggle. It shouldn't bind up. The flanges shouldn't dig into the rails. Yeah, this should be great on curves, and I'll show you that later on. The couplings, though, are not kinematic. Hornby's loco did have kinematic couplings. This doesn't, so I guess that's a little bit less good for your tight curves. In terms of pickups though, we've got plunger pickups, which are sprung against each wheel. Now, plunger pickups have a bit of a bad reputation because on certain old models, the Airfix 14XX, they were an absolute nightmare. I have to say though, they do work well on more modern locos. You do have to access them and clean them, keep them serviced and such, but that's okay with this loco because that's really easy to do. So the base is held on by a series of screws, and there's no brake rigging in the way of these screws either. I did have to remove some of Hornby's brake rigging to get to the screws. So yeah, Rapido, slightly better. Take those screws out and look, the base came off entirely. I had to stop and celebrate a little bit at this because it was not what I was expecting. But yeah, look at that. All of the brake rigging is part of the base keeper plate. You don't have to risk damaging fiddly little details to get that off. It all comes off as a single piece. That is really, really good. Well done, Rapido, for improving on this at last. Really, really good. We've got proper bearings, separate bearings on all of the driving axles. That's good. And here's a look at the pickups, which are actually individual modules, which you can remove freely, which means that they are just a slot-in part. Absolutely fascinating. Now, the outer wheels have an extra spring on their pickups, which is really weird. And without that spring, the pickup still springs. So yeah, I guess the only reason I can think of is that the spring there will constrain the movement of the front and back wheels so that they don't flop all over the place. And the fact that the center wheels don't have that spring means that the center wheels can move a little bit more. I'm guessing that's why it is, but it's very, very unusual. I don't think I've seen this before. So fascinating. Individual pickup modules, which of course would be replaceable then if something went wrong with one of them. You could just slot in a new one if Rapido could supply you with the part. So very, very interesting. With this loco, it is the rear axle driven. With the Hornby, it's the center one. With this one, it's the rear axle. So probably a slightly simpler drive on this. And then for body removal, 4 screws. I undid those exactly as the instructions described, and the body came straight off. You could have knocked me down with a feather, honestly. What a serviceable loco this is. I still wake up in a cold sweat now thinking about that Rapido 01 and what a nightmare it was to take the body off. Not so with this, and it makes such a difference. Anyway, nice chassis here, very neat and tidy, but a lot of features have been crammed onto it. So we've got the next 18-pin DCC socket. I'm not sure if there's enough room to cram an HM7000 into this. If not, then I guess you'd have to use the Rapido sound decoders. If it's not HM7000 compatible though, that does make the Hornby model cheaper, I believe, if you want a sound fitted version. So keep that in mind. Anyway, we've got Stay Alive pre-fitted, and there's over 1 farads worth of capacitor here, which is really good. So nice to see that included. I don't think the Hornby had that, did it? I don't remember. It's got LEDs in the firebox, a red and a yellow one, although just the red one, I think it is, works on analog. I'll show you that in just a second. We've got a pre-fitted speaker in a very nifty location. Look at that. So they've stowed that away inside the coal bunker, which I think is the secret to this, because if it couldn't have gone there, it would have had to have gone further forward in the tank somewhere, and maybe some other feature would have had to have been sacrificed. So great to see that. And then the motor is underneath this circuit board, so I removed a couple of screws, took that board away, and there is the motor. I'm not really sure what sort of motor this is. Presumably it's a 5-pole. Doesn't really perform like one, but I don't know what it is. I decided not to take it apart for obvious reasons, but it does have a flywheel. Again, Hornby's tank engine, Hornby's J13, did not have the flywheel, so that's another thing that Rapido have over Hornby. And then finally, in terms of the gauging, I got 14.5mm back to back, which is a tiny bit tight. That's slightly above the standard, but because there's so much play in that center axle, that doesn't really cause a problem on the curves. So a brilliant mechanism. It's got every feature you could want, and everything is accessible and serviceable. What a good job. Best Rapido mechanism I think I've seen, actually. Really good. Anyway, let me jump back in time and I'll show you how this ran. Okay, moment of truth. Is she alive, and is she a good runner? Rapido have had an amazing year for producing just incredible runners. Hopefully, this one will also be as good. So, forwards direction, let's give her her first ever run. Here we go, turning up. Not a smooth start then, but I should say she has not run in yet, so there is chance for this to improve. But it is, yes, it is alive. Yeah, sorry, I went silent there. I forgot I have to talk. Yes, it's alive, and already that seems to be getting a bit more reliable, doesn't it? So reliability is the thing. I did have, I think, at least one of the Hornby J13s stopping and stuttering quite a bit on the points. I don't think the Hornby one has a flywheel, does it? So it will be, well, you will know whether this one does or not. But yeah, if this one survives on points a bit better than Hornby does, then that could be a point in Rapido's favour. But anyway, let's test and see what the speed and the gearing is like. So let me back up and I'll run by at half power. Here we go. This is 50%. So it's, at the moment, assuming it's not going to sort of speed up as it runs in, that is very slow and controlled, isn't it? Not too fast for a goods engine originally. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Full speed? Yeah, I would say that has a pretty good range of speeds. Right, is there any activity inside the cab? Which is a poncy, stupid way of saying, is there any cab lighting? Yep, I can see just a straight red LED on in there. No flickering or anything, at least not on analog. But yep, it certainly does have working cab lighting that works on analog. So that's pretty good to see as well. Right, let's see about the torque test then. We'll try this again later on after it's run in if there are any issues, but here we go, 50%. Yep, it's turning its wheels. So there's power there, that's really good. Right, the Hornby one was an incredible crawler. So is this, let's see, turning up very, very slowly. Let's see if it can creep. Here we go. Still turning up. Still turning up. Is it alive? I can't tell. Oh, yep, it's alive. All right. So no, it can't crawl. Not at the moment. Again, I'm going to let this have its full run in. Maybe it will get better. But at the moment, yeah, that's coggy. It's not slow. And it's certainly not smooth. Gradual acceleration. Oh, it gets worse. Oh, goodness. Wow. God, that's awful. I think that's the worst out-of-the-box performance we've seen from Rapido this year. Look at that. Normally this is the sweet spot, but today this is the sweet spot for poor running. Look at that. Crikey. So running in has got a lot to do today, hasn't it? Running in needs to transform this loco from a bit of a jerky mess to a beautiful, smooth and powerful tank engine, such as what we saw in the Hornby J52 and J13. So with that, let's send this off around the track and let's see how she gets on around the various curves. Here she goes, 50% speed. All right, here she goes. Yes, surprisingly slow, actually. The gearing does seem great. I would guess this is slower than Hornby's. Any slowing down on the curves? Nope. Not at all. There's a lot of movement in those centre wheels, so it shouldn't bind too much on the curves, and it certainly didn't seem to slow down there. So yeah, it seems to be a very, very happy performer at the higher speeds. It is running perfectly smoothly at these speeds. It's not slowing down. We've seen that it's relatively powerful in terms of torque, so that's all very good. It's just not great at a crawl at the moment, and that could be a problem for a goods engine. You know, originally these were for freight, so it is important that these can run slowly, and it's important that they can be precise in their maneuvers and such. So hopefully we're going to see a massive improvement. I will now allow this to run in for 30 minutes in both directions, and then we'll come back and see if this is any better. Okay folks, we are back. Running in is complete, and yeah, no problem. At least at the higher speeds, this was perfectly good. It never cut out, it never derailed, it never gave me any problems whatsoever. It was perfectly good. But what about that crawl? It was really, really poor before. So let's see if a good, solid run-in has improved it at all. Here we go, turning up slowly. Fingers crossed, please. Oh. Yeah, it seems better. It's still not quite... It's not quite at Hornby levels, is it? Let's turn it up a bit. Ooh. Yeah, look how jerky that is. Yeah, it's still not great. It's a lot better than it was, but it's still not brilliant. Let's try it in reverse. Ready? Bit more. Yeah, so it's a lot better. I mean, it's not jerking along like it was, but it's still not great, is it? Yeah, jerky. Oh dear, it's even worse in reverse. Yeah, not good. Yeah, I mean, even straight out of the box without any running in, my Hornby example ran a lot better than this. But obviously your mileage may vary. Have I got a faulty motor in here? I don't know. But please do let me know how you get on with yours if you get one. If you're running it on analog, did it run well straight out of the box, or did it have to run in before it became smooth? If you're on digital, what's the difference on digital? Is it smoother? I mean, look at that, that's really slow. But it's not cutting out. I'm not having to push it, but it's kind of stopping and stalling repeatedly. Yeah, it's not a smooth motion, is it? I suppose it can go quite slowly though, which it couldn't before. A little bit more. Oh yeah. Yeah, so that is disappointing. Obviously for really precise coupling or maybe shunting, that's not ideal. Let's see at what point it becomes smooth. It's about... It's more or less there. When the coupling rods are up, it does momentarily stop. So yeah, that's not too bad. I reckon on DCC, your mileage may vary with that. I think you might be better on DCC. But on analog, that's a touch disappointing. Yeah, because the Hornby was an incredible crawler and it was heavier. So it's not, you know, it's not really an excuse that it's heavy, because the Hornby was even heavier. But anyway, yeah, it's a nice runner then, except at the crawl. Yes, and it doesn't stop on points. I'll demonstrate that in a second. Just show you the torque again. Ready? So that's good. Yeah, that's very good. Let me send it to the points then, and we'll do it. We won't be too cruel. We won't go ridiculously slow, but I'll go reasonably slowly, because the Hornby one was cutting out at, well, at anything below a modest speed. So let's go about there, shall we? So those plunger pickups, there's a lot to be said for them. I mean, look at that. The dead zone's there, by the way. It's not stopping. So that is really good. And the pulling power was surprisingly good as well. So the tractive effort, I make 0.38 newtons, which is more than the Hornby J13, even though the Hornby one was heavier. So I think it must be the wheels again. I think the wheels must be just slightly rougher, a rougher material which grips the track better so that it is more powerful. I can't see what else it could possibly be that makes this more powerful, but it is, so that's really good. That should be about 24 coaches on straight and level track. So I've set up a very large freight train. Well, I suppose it's not that large, but it's fairly large, and if she can haul this lot without slowing down around the curves and such, I'll be fairly impressed. So let's back up, let's see what she can do. Here goes. Stuttering into life. Oh, it is a real shame about that, not being able to start smoothly. Right, are the couplings any good? Let's see. Oh dear. Sounded good. Yeah, you can see better than I can. Are they in? Yeah, they're in. Right, here we go then. Rapido J52 with quite a sizable load, and we'll go up to just less than 50% speed. Yeah, I think that looks about right. So I've got a bit of a J52 session lined up for you. On the middle line, I have the Hornby J13, which is a better performer. Yeah, hands down, much, much better. And I'm pretty sure it was solid right out of the box, wasn't it? Good performer. To be fair, that one didn't cut out on the points. But yeah, look at that crawl. And that's with a load as well. Yeah, so performance-wise, at least based on these two examples, and I know that's not the complete picture, but based on the two I've got, and I've got a second Hornby one, of course, as well, Hornby's definitely seems to run the best. And then on the inside line, we have my other Hornby J52, and I can actually call this one a J52 because it's in the LNER black, so after reclassification, here it is. And again, this one runs pretty much the same. I believe this one struggles a bit more on the points, so maybe arguably this is not clearly better than the Rapido, but at the slow speed, I mean, look at that. There's no contest, is there? So much better. But yeah, off it goes. Let's catch up with the Rapido, see how it's getting on with that big train. Alright, here she goes, looking beautiful. And she doesn't appear to be struggling. Is she going to start struggling on the curves and the incline? No, I'm not seeing anything like that. No, no slowdown. So apart from the crawl, the performance is absolutely perfect, which makes me think maybe the motor isn't faulty. If the motor was faulty, I would expect to see it struggling under load. I wouldn't expect to see smooth running at the slightly higher speeds. But it is genuinely absolutely spot on, except for at the crawl. But yeah, it is possible that it's faulty, so please do let me know how yours run. Also, it did get better with running in. It's had its full hours running in, but you know, maybe after days and weeks and whatnot, maybe it will be even better again. So maybe I'll have to do a follow-up video on this. So please feedback, let me know what you think. I'll keep running this as often as I can, and then in the new year I might come back and see if this is running even better. Although it is worth saying that the Hornby one crawled perfectly without needing any running in, actually. I mean, obviously I did run it in, but I'm pretty sure it was a great crawler right out of the box. And I can't say the same for this one. So yeah, there are differences. Which is better is really hard to say. So let's go through some of the essentials. Rapido's is cheaper, but it's also slightly lighter by about 13 grams. Hornby's is higher quality, the fit and finish is a lot better, but it's not quite as well painted as Rapido's. I think Rapido's has slightly better detailing in areas. It's certainly got more complexity in its detailing, but then the fit and finish of some of the parts isn't quite as good. The build quality on Hornby's was really absolutely unshakable. They've both got very, very good mechanisms. Rapido's is slightly more serviceable, but Hornby's is not a problem in terms of servicing. It's slightly less convenient, but not much. Hornby's doesn't have a flywheel, Rapido's does. I don't believe Hornby's have stay alive capacitors fitted, Rapido's does. But despite having a slightly better mechanism, in my experience, Hornby's ran slightly better as well. So based on my experience, I think Hornby's is the best one, even though it's more expensive. But if it turns out that mine's faulty and other Rapido J52s run absolutely faultlessly, then is Hornby's better? I don't know, because you've got a slightly better mechanism. Again, if the quality is better on other models, if the glazing piece isn't missing on others, which is guaranteed, you know, that's not going to be a thing with every model. If those details were fitted better, I don't know, then maybe Rapido's would be slightly better. It's really subjective, it's really hard to say. I think Hornby's is slightly better. For me, based on the things that I like in models, I would choose the Hornby, but if you prefer Rapido's, I totally get that. If you get a really good example, you might think Rapido's is much better. In terms of looks, in terms of paintwork and finish, it's got to be Rapido. So it's really not clear. It's not clear. I have an opinion, but it's not cut and dry. I can't say definitively, no. Unfortunately, it's not ever so clear. Right, let's have some ratings then, or at least let's try and have some ratings for the Rapido J52, because there is so much to unpack here. First things first, this is a dramatic improvement over some of Rapido's other locomotives, specifically their other tank engines. There's a lot here that is much better than we've seen before, and in fact, in many ways, it's a shame that Hornby's J52 or J13 was so good, because if Hornby's model had just been okay and not possibly the best tank engine I've ever seen, then Rapido would have beaten Hornby hands down. But there are a few problems with the Rapido loco, a few things still letting it down, even though it is so much better than some of the other locos they've produced this year. So level of detail, I've not been able to give 5-star, I've given it 4-star, although there is quite a lot of good stuff going on here. The paint job is definitely more complex than on the Hornby loco, so keep that in mind. The cab detail is better as well than on the Hornby loco, and I prefer the finish. I think that looks better. We've got possibly a little bit more detail on the Rapido model. There's certainly more separately fitted parts, such as the bars on the windows, that sort of thing. It's also got lighting inside the cab, it's got sprung buffers, great accessories, fireman's tools, loads of different cosmetic coupling options. No lamps though, that is something that Hornby's included. On the downside though, there are pretty chunky handrails on this loco. I think they look a lot finer and more realistic on the Hornby model. The paint finish in areas, mainly the running plate but also on the tanks, has a bit of an orange peel effect. I do think the quality of the die casting was better on Hornby's model. It looks a lot smoother for me. The finish of some of the parts isn't the best. I don't really like the chrome effect on the handrails. I think that should be shinier. That would have looked better. Some of the rods as well look very, very plasticky. That rod on the other side that's kind of wonky, that's clearly plastic. Big parting line, moulding marks on it. Not the most realistic in the world. And then you've got the chimney, the look of that chimney with the join. It's kind of distracting. There's a few things that spoil it a little bit, but other than that, the level of detail is really, really good, particularly from any sort of distance. The performance is a real shame, and again, I'm going to say I don't know whether this is a faulty loco or whether they're all like this. I've only tried one, so I don't have any other Rapido J52s to compare this against, but mine was not a good crawler. It cannot crawl properly, it's very jerky, it doesn't seem to have any torque at the slow speeds. That's a real pity. At the higher speeds, it's fantastic. It's perfectly smooth. That makes me question whether it's actually not faulty and whether that is actually the way it runs. I'm not too sure, but for mine, I have had to knock off a couple of stars because it doesn't run right at the slow speeds. Otherwise though, it is great. It doesn't stall on the points, which is better than Hornby's. The speed and gearing is very good. I like that a lot. And it doesn't slow down on the curves, which is also great. Pulling power, it is more powerful than Hornby's as well, which is odd because it's lighter, but I got 0.38 newtons tractive effort, which is about 24 coaches on straight and level track, so that is very impressive. The mechanism I cannot fault. This is probably the best mechanism I've seen from Rapido because yes, it's good quality, it's got all of the bells and whistles you'd expect, but it's also serviceable. It's not an absolute nightmare to take this apart and clean it and lubricate it. It's actually quite an enjoyable one to take apart. There's no risk of damage. Well, there's always a risk, but there's no great risk of damage. It's a really pleasant loco to take apart. Proper bearings, very reliable pickups on all wheels. It's got a flywheel, it's got stay alive capacitors, it's got a pre-fitted speaker. Yeah, it's a really, really good mechanism, but serviceable as well. The quality then, again, this is kind of not quite where it needs to be for a loco of this price, at least not in my opinion. Now, this is a lot better in terms of quality than some Rapido locos we've seen. I didn't see any visible glue on this, that's really good. The paintwork, accurate as anything, there's no splodges, nothing like that. I didn't see any issues with the paintwork, and I really appreciate seeing metal handrails on this loco. A lot of Rapido locos this year have had plastic handrails, which I just don't like as much. They feel cheap, they don't always sit straight. These look a lot better. Pity about the finish of some of them, but they are better quality than the plastic ones. But unfortunately, the general fit and finish of the model isn't that great, especially not next to Hornby's. So the fit of the dome, not great. That chimney I've already mentioned, not very refined with that gap in the middle of it. We've got a part missing, that glazing piece wasn't there and I couldn't find it in the box, so I don't think I've got that to even refit. We've got the misfitted part as well, that's a shame. And of course it is lighter than the Hornby model, so there's a bit less metal on board. It's only 13 grams lighter, so it's not massive, but yeah, it is lighter than Hornby's. But again, it's a lot less plasticky than some of Rapido's other locos from this year. Much more die casting on this one. Value for money then, I've actually given the same score as I gave to Hornby's, 4-star. I was going to say this was better value than Hornby's, and if it had run a bit better, I would say this is better value because it's about £17 cheaper at the retailers. It's only a little bit lighter, but it does have a slightly better mechanism. And of course it's got all that extra complexity in the paintwork as well, but the quality's not quite as good and the performance isn't quite as good. So overall, I don't think there's any net improvement in terms of value for money. It's not a bargain, so I'm not going to give it 5-star, but yeah, the price is fine. And if you can get one that runs better than mine, then yeah, I would say this is slightly better value than Hornby's. Mine though, not so much. Overall then, that is 7.75 out of 10, or a grade of B. Yeah, to improve, this needed to have a bit better fit and finish, and obviously better performance. Then it would have gotten an A quite easily. Into the logbook we go then, and it is 24th place above the Tipfield Thunderbolt set, and below Hornby's Royal Scot. So a great job from Rapido. Like I say, the best tank engine we've seen from them, I think. Is it better than Hornby's? Well, that's subjective, but according to me, no. I gave Hornby's J13 a higher score than this, and I do think that was deserved. Well, there you have it then, folks. That will just about do it for my review of Rapido's new J52. Yeah, I mean, it has to be said, this is one of the best Rapido locos I've seen for quite a while. It's got to be up there, pretty close to the level of the Sterling single, really. The only downside is Hornby just happened to be making the same model at the same time, and they just happened to make it possibly their best tank engine of all time. So Rapido really had their work cut out for them. You know, it was not going to be easy to beat the Hornby J52, even less to hands down blow it out of the water. You know, Hornby did such a good job on it that it was going to be very difficult for Rapido to beat it. And I think had their build quality been slightly better, if this had run slightly better, at the lower price and the very, very similar weight, I think Rapido could have been in with a chance of beating Hornby. But yeah, up close, Rapido's just didn't quite meet the mark, at least not in my opinion. But what about your opinion? Have you tried both of these? Which one, based on your evidence, is the best? Maybe if you know more about the prototypes than I do, and I don't know that much, maybe you would look at these and say Rapido's is more accurate, and therefore that's another point in Rapido's favour. I don't know. But anyway, if you're interested in buying one of these, I do have affiliate links down in the description. But for now, I will leave this one here. Please do let me know what you think, and I'll see you again very, very soon for another review. All right, cheers everybody. You take care.